Alors, merci beaucoup, Yann. Merci encore, Dominique, pour avoir accepté cette idée folle d'exposition sur le cinéma en trompe-l'œil et l'art du matte painting. Alors, je suis ravie d'être avec vous ce soir pour accueillir un géant des effets spéciaux, du cinéma, et quelqu'un dont, a priori, le nom n'est pas toujours très familier. Certains d'entre vous le connaissent bien, mais la grande partie d'entre vous, Michael Pangrazio, c'est pas forcément quelqu'un de très connu, et pourtant, je suis sûre que vous avez ici tous vu plusieurs dizaines de ces images qui ont bercé finalement l'histoire du cinéma des années 80 jusqu'à nos jours, quasiment, puisque vous allez voir que la carrière de Michael est impressionnante et qu'il a à la fois su mener des projets d'envergure, Hollywood étant évidemment son terrain de jeu principal, de ILM jusqu'à Weta, en passant par sa structure, vous verrez, Mattworth, qui est juste un lieu incroyable. Et ça va nous permettre finalement aussi de mettre en perspective 40 ans d'effets spéciaux. C'est aussi ça, la force de cette masterclass, ça va être de discuter à travers une personne incroyable de la manière dont petit à petit les effets spéciaux se sont transformés, comment petit à petit on a changé la manière de raconter des histoires. Et c'est des histoires incroyables, vous allez vous en rendre compte à travers le petit film que nous allons lancer tout de suite, qui va vous permettre déjà d'introduire l'univers de Michael Pangrazio, et puis vous aurez ensuite la personne derrière les images et l'univers.
Nous célébrons ce soir un artiste qui a marqué l'imaginaire de générations entières. Michael Pangrazio n'a pas seulement créé des décors mémorables, il a donné vie à des univers entiers, le plus souvent imperceptibles aux yeux des spectateurs. De la peinture sur verre au pixel, son art a repoussé les limites du possible au cinéma. Artiste peintre autodidacte, son aventure commence en 1978, quand le mythique studio Industrial Light and Magic lui ouvre ses portes. Sous le mentorat de Ralph McQuarrie, il découvre l'art du matte painting sur verre, une discipline exigeant une maîtrise exceptionnelle de la perspective et de la lumière. Très vite, ses créations se font remarquer et marqueront les esprits. Ces univers visuels sont aujourd'hui des références incontournables, laissant son empreinte sur des dizaines de films devenus cultes.
What was it like to work with Michael Pangrazio? Challenging, amazing, and I have never met another supervisor since then that I felt like I could really trust. He did not make errors, and he stepped up to the plate for the task of creating matte painting shots that were the best in the world. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
En 1988, il cofonde le studio Mattworth avec Craig Barron, se tournant progressivement vers la direction artistique, tout en observant les prémices de la révolution numérique. Au début des années 2000, il collabore avec Weta et appliquera ses décennies d'expertise traditionnelle aux outils modernes, en revisitant la Terre du milieu du Hobbit ou encore l'île du Crâne du King Kong de Peter Jackson.
Hello, Michael. Hey, it's Gino. How are you? Hey, Hey, it's been a very long time. Hey, congratulations on your Lifetime Achievement Genie Award. That's fantastic news. As you know, Michael, I've always been such a huge fan of yours, and you've been so inspiring, ever since the early Star Wars days. And really missed working with you in the art department and having our great lunches that we used to have together. And, since you've been gone, I haven't had lunch since, so really wish you'd come back sometime so we can have another one. Anyways, wishing you all the very best, Michael. Love you lots. Take care.
The reason I think Michael's work is timeless is because, he was fortunate to work on such iconic films, and not just fortunate to work on them, they were lucky to have him, because he would create these iconic, epic vistas and establishing shots and help define the world of these, iconic movies that we all know and love. And so, being a part of cinema is being a part of history. And so when you've worked on such an amazing catalog as Michael has, your work will inherently be timeless forever, and you're forever part of film history, and is such a great gift to give to the world.
Michael, it's been 20 years since you joined us at Weta as the art director on King Kong, and since then we've done about a dozen films together. And what I've always admired about your work is your talent for bringing together the real and the fantastic, because that's really at the heart of what we do, and nobody does it better than you. So congratulations on your Genie Award.
En lui remettant ce soir un génie d'honneur, nous ne célébrons pas seulement un grand maître du matte painting, mais un architecte de la narration visuelle, dont l'héritage continue et continuera encore longtemps à inspirer notre imaginaire collectif.
So Michael, I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. As you know, we have a lot of things to see together and to talk about. Obviously, we won't be able to talk about every wonderful picture you made, but we are going to talk about a lot of things. And we are going to travel around your career between ILM, 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Yeah. And to now, you're Michael Pangrazio over there when you went to Lucasfilm Archives. Yeah. And we are going to travel between matte painting to art direction, your whole career, what the philosophy of work, actually. And we are going to begin by the beginning. And we are going to solve the first mystery over there, because why can we see spaceship and flying saucer over there? And to be more serious, how did you make matte painting? Because it wasn't very famous at the time.
Well, in the past, I didn't plan on being a matte painter. I didn't even know what it was. But I met a gentleman, and he happened to be a flying saucer person. And what I mean by that is he was a human, but he believed in the flying saucers. And he invited me to his house to teach his wife airbrush, which I said, yes, I can do that for you. And went to his house. I never really did teach the wife airbrush. He just wanted to talk to me about flying saucers. And then he had this sort of amazing, rare Albert Whitlock matte painting up in his attic. And he said, I want to show you something. So I went up to the attic and I saw the Albert Whitlock painting, and he said, do you think that you could ever do such a thing? And I said, well, maybe in time I could. So he had a tiny special effects company, and it was called Intravision. It was a front projection system, very much like the same technical system that was used on 2001 Space Odyssey for the ape sequences with the backgrounds, the big, large backgrounds. And he had a machine. It was very humble special effects company, basically him and myself at that point, so it was very humble. And I had an opportunity to meet at a meeting that was related to the Introvision system, Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnson. And we exchanged information, and I was able to be asked to come up to ILM I think it was about 3 months later, because they were looking for a young artist to be an apprentice matte painter. And I went up to the meeting and put my artwork in the screening room to have it viewed. And George Lucas came in with Richard Edlund, who was an effects supervisor, looked at the work. I went to lunch, I left, and came back, and I think things went well because a couple of weeks later I got an offer to come up to ILM to work on Empire Strikes Back. But at that time I was a very, very naive person about the film industry, not technically minded, artistically minded only. And throughout time I learned both, but I still, where my heart is the artistic. You know, I always like to mention this, one last point, is that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences lays out really what film is. It's art, it's science. So it's technical, but it's also artistic. And I felt all my career, it was my role to bring the artistic in, to represent it, to consider its importance, and how the audience reacts to it. Later in art direction, that's really what I focused in on. Yeah.
So you had to learn your work with legends like Ralph McQuarrie, like Harrison Hellenshaw, you work with Dennis Muren, Phil Tippett, and so on. So how did you learn to do matte painting? Because before that, you never really did painting.
Well, to answer the question, and it's probably an unusual answer, is that, you know, it's like being a kitten. If you observe a kitten, it doesn't know what it can't do, and it gets itself in trouble sometimes, and I kind of did that too over time. But you don't know what you can't do, so when you're young, you think you can just dive in and just do it. And I did. So I learned, you know, shot to shot, things increased. To do this, to do big backings first for the Haas sequence. And it was always a privilege to work at ILM in the early days because it was very free and very expansive. What I mean by that is artistically. I was able to contribute and contribute my opinion. If I would work for a more, established is the wrong word, but a more complex corporate setting, I probably couldn't have been as expressive as I was in the early days. So this is kind of nostalgic for me to see this. I really like seeing these clips.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you work on this background, and suddenly we can find it over there. And the beauty of painting is that usually we don't see them. I mean, I introduce you and say,
yeah.
You don't know Michael Pangrazio, but you do know the images he created, because it's everywhere over there, but we don't look at them in purpose, I mean.
Yeah. You're not, if you see them, like, oh, there's a painting, that's a nice painting, it takes you out of the movie. So you gotta hide it as much as possible, and you're successful only if people don't know about it.
We talked with Jean-Marie Vives and Chouk at the previous masterclass about to be humble, and you don't have a lot of ego in this kind of work. Do you agree?
Well, you do, but as a human, you have a big ego. I think. I can speak for others. But you suppress it. So the thing is that I learned early on from Ralph McQuarrie, who was a very humble man. I used to go over to Ralph's house and watch him paint. He was really a big mentor of mine. And he was the humblest man because he'd finish something exquisite. I loved it. But he would say, I don't know about this. I'm not sure if this is good enough or right, or I have doubts. And I learned from that attitude. And I think that is always striving for something better, striving for a better result, and also being open to criticism. That you can agree quickly with somebody saying, well, this doesn't work over here, and you're going to be defensive about it. You're going to be eager to hear that and to correct it. And I always thought that film was what's on the screen is what we're all here for. That's what counts. So I had, in my supervisory sort of role, I always emphasized the ego thing.
So that's not an easy part, because you have to hide the painting, and sometimes You talked to me about that because you said to me that there was just a little place for a human being, the real plate, and everything else was a painting. So how did you hide this painting?
Yeah. This was a fun painting for me when I first came to ILM, and I did the artwork based upon, of course, the shuttle and tried to be as accurate as possible, but Darth Vader comes down there, so it distracts your eye. It's very important to have movement in a matte painting because, of course, it's a painting, it's flat and doesn't move. But I also did a tabletop miniature, which I double exposed for all the real old timers. If there are any here, they'll know DX. You know, you double expose the original image with another image. You can plus it, basically. So I plussed these lights on, which blinked, and I created a tabletop in the foreground just to give it more depth and credibility. It's little things like that that help. I'm not saying it will make the shot be perfect, but it will help.
Because it was not very long on screen. It lasts only for 3, 4, 5 seconds, actually.
Yeah, and that's what's really important. But I think, you know, I'm going to jump ahead, maybe in anticipation of maybe a question that you might ask me. This is a good example of how it saves money. So matte painting is used to save the production from having to build that shuttle. And if it works, if people buy the fact that, yeah, I buy the shot, it doesn't take you out of the film, then they've saved how much money? I don't know, a lot.
Thanks to you.
Yeah, I know, and they should have paid me more for that. But.
Totally agree with you. So this is one of your best shot ever, and we can see your wonderful workplace and, you know, quite a mess, but we won't talk about that.
This was on a good day, by the way. This is after I cleaned up.
So for this painting, you had to create a lot of details. So how many details did you have to create, to put inside, and especially in that one, because it's a very important shot in the film?
Yeah, this is an example of a tough one because it's so much of it is painted. And, you know, you have a lot of reference for these ships, and the lighting is important. And there's a black area kind of to the right above the middle. And that's where a couple of, let's go back to the bluer one. Yeah, that one. There's a black kind of rectangle above the ship with the red stripe. And the frame, we did tests on this. This was rear projection. Did tests on this, and it looked kind of dead. And so I thought, well, why don't we put some guys out, pilots out there? That makes sense. So we drew that circle in the painting, and then we took that, lined it up through a Mitchell camera, an old camera where you can have a viewfinder where you can see through the film. And we continued the line on a stage and painted it the same color, and then had 2 pilots walking. And that really helped the shot. I'm not saying that, I think this is important to be completely candid. I think that the new methods are much more real. And when I look back on my work, people clap or people appreciate it, and I'm always seeing the flaw. I'm always looking at it going, you know, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I think that things are improved in many ways in visual effects. They become much more realistic.
So as a man painter, you had to create a lot of different universe. I mean, you have sci-fi with The Empire Strikes Back, The Return of the Jedi. You work with the fantasy landscape in Dragon Slayer. And for this Raider of the Ark, you had to create a Nepal landscape as if it was a real one. So you talked to me that even if you had to create every kind of images and location, you had some specialties in ELM. Some are better in landscapes or better in industrial way.
Yeah.
How did you dispatch the work between?
Well, when I became supervisor, I had to know who was good at what, because you give that to them, because you want the best. You know, some people are great at mechanical things, some people are great at landscapes. I'm just a landscape person, so that was easy for me. So I would have been the natural person to work on this one. And I did, and this was, what is it? It's 100% painting. I think it was okay. I think it looked pretty good. I never heard anybody complain about it. And this was a Steven Spielberg movie, and you know, he's got a great eye, and he's not shy about saying, excuse me, he's not shy about saying, you know, let's improve it here or there. He's a real gentleman to work with, and I must say, as a filmmaker and somebody who's super famous, he is like a dream to work with because he's a gentleman about everything. So if there was anything that he didn't like, he would have spoken up. So that got accepted through the process of approval. The only thing that I think back on that haunts me is the smoke was not so good.
Because
Coming
it
out of the
doesn't
chimney.
move.
Yeah, it didn't look so good. So.
One which is very good is one of your masterpieces. I mean, this is the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So sorry to spoil the film. It's the end of this picture. This is beautiful work because it was very challenging for you. It's a very long shot, and it's the last shot of the film, so you had to do something very incredible. How did you take account into those different kind of challenges? And you created those kind of tabletop miniature. You like this kind of thing. Your real references. How much important was there for you? Those real
Oh, very important, because I realized, I think the psychology of, to me, the early analog effects business was to be honest with yourself. So it's almost like a psychology problem, which is you gotta, and I learned early enough that I couldn't use my imagination purely and simply by itself to come up with the right look. I needed real things, either nature reference, you know, with a nature shot, or this. So this is what I asked for. I, you know, participated with these guys, and I said, let's make a little tabletop. It's pretty cheap. Doesn't take much time or money, and you get that. That gives me an indication of what does it look like to have these pools of light and et cetera. And then you have to take this and accommodate it for film. Yeah, because you have to lift the black and mid levels so it photographs properly. But yeah, that's the result of knowing your limitations. I think that's being honest and realistic about things. Your capacities is really important in the old days. I think in the new days it's a different story. Maybe we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, of course.
We're going to talk about our director. I wanted to show it again because it's wonderful.
And what is humorous to me is amusing to me, because this is this historically religious object with this great power, and the commentary behind it is really the government has it, and what it does with it is put it in a warehouse to be obscure forever. And there's a message to it that I think is kind of amusing.
So very fast you became supervisor. You had to work with huge people like Chris Evans and Caroline Green, and just a little game with the people in the room. Could you recognize who is who? Who saw the exhibition? So where's Michael? Okay, why? We're kidding, Michael. So yeah, obviously you're on the left.
Yeah.
And Chris on the right, so you had a lot of people working with you.
Yes.
You have to, how did you work as a supervisor, and especially with this guy over there?
Oh, yes. No, he was very interesting because I don't know who hired him. I didn't. I don't recall hiring him. But that's Dave Fincher, who turned out to be Dave Fincher, that people would know. But at the time, he was the PA, the assistant that would go get lunch, and he'd be the guy that, okay, Dave is gone for lunch, why isn't he back yet? And then you'd talk to Dave and say, you know, come on, you gotta hustle here. We're waiting for you. And you gotta clean over here the dust on the floor, and there's papers and things to do. So that's how he started. But soon enough, in talking to him, I think he worked for us about a year, maybe, in the Matt department. He started loading the camera, so he learned quickly. However, he said one day he came in and he said, I've got this idea for a commercial, you know, for the American Cancer Society. It's a fetus within a woman smoking a cigarette. And I think he did that commercial eventually. It was very iconic. And I thought, he's got this real desire to be a film director, and he's got these ideas. He's an idea guy. And so I never thought, I sold him a coffee table one time, toward the end of him before he quit ILM. I would have never known that he would achieve what he has, So I'm very proud of him, actually. I can't say that I had any influence whatsoever in helping him be famous and being a good director. Maybe the opposite, actually. But he's very, interesting fellow. And then Chris Evans over here, who I hired just because of his sheer talent. And at the time, Caroline Green was her name, and she was from another state back east. She came for an interview, and she was terrific, great artist, and so we started to form a matte team. Because most of the artists, matte artists at that time they were very old people, and the craft was wasn't continued until Star Wars kind of revived matte painting, I think. I mean, this is my opinion and experience. I could be wrong about the history of it, but we had to hire a new generation because my mentor, Alan Maley, when I first went to ILM, taught me. He was a contemporary of Peter Ellenshaw, and Peter passed away, and then Alan passed away. And so, we had their wisdom and their example before that happened, and I tried to convey that same, but also with the technology had changed slightly, So I tried to accommodate that, but it was a great crew and it was a great time. It was a fun time. I think it's kind of a golden era I look back on fondly, yeah.
And as a supervisor, you had to split work between them, you have to do some politics sometimes. How was it to be?
Well, I think any organization is political, because human beings are political. And I wasn't so good at that.
That's not an easy
I probably
job.
made too many enemies in that area, because I was very outspoken when I was young. I've settled out a little bit, but we had these dailies, and to me, again, this idea of don't get your ego involved in the work, be open to, don't have a thin skin, don't be hurt by criticism or critiquing of your work. So we'd have these dailies in the morning where we all sat around and we looked at each other's work, and I said, okay,
let's go.
Pick it apart. And people would. And then, the compliments also, it's both. But I ended up, deciding ultimately, like a little here, a little there. Let's improve it that way. So I think through that system was good results came. Yeah, that's how I ran things kind of, without being so political either. I was I'll be very brief about this, but I was very protective of the creative part of the department. And during that time, maybe I shouldn't express this so much, I'll be minimal with it, is that the company was growing and middle management was growing and swelling. And suddenly I had to report to people about what we were doing, and they were getting into the nuts and bolts, and I was thinking, well, we're successful, just leave us alone. That was kind of my attitude. So that's why I'm not so political that way. Yeah.
So that's why you left ILM about
yes,
after
actually,
7 years?
it did lead. It was a seed that planted, or a seed that was planted a long time ago of being exposed to the beginning of ILM in Marin County, where things were super free, to later on when I remember being called into the stage with the rest of the company, and there were some MBAs, business administration people from Ivy League University that were coming in to revamp ILM, and I thought, no, don't do that, because it's not a business. We don't make car tires. These are one-off images. They're particularly artistic. You can't apply that same template or model to running a company like you can a business where it's a conveyor belt kind of thing. So I couldn't. That's when I started to want to leave. Yeah.
So you became CEO, supervisor, and matte painter for your own company, Matte World. You created with Craig Barron.
Yeah.
Craig was your cinematographer.
Yes.
You had a strong relationship between matte painter and cinematographer because you had to work together. So how was it to work with one specialized cinematographer?
Well, he was my camera person at ILM, so I suppose it was all those hours of, I don't know, in the old days you used to shoot a painting, and sometimes you'd sit in the room while the camera was shooting, frame by frame. It would be hours. So him and I talked, and I suppose you could apply the word conspired about, well, couldn't we do this on our own? As things got more complex, and we kind of decided, yeah, we could. So we made a move one summer that was a summer where we didn't have a lot of work because work came and went. Even at ILM, when you were an employee, sometimes there were breaks. And it was a big, long break, and we thought, okay, fine. Anyway, he got a project in for us as a new company from HBO. It was by Dawn's Early Light, and we got a contract to work on all the effects for it. And we did, and we won an Emmy for it. So, it's a TV Academy Award. So that turned out, that was a good start for the company. We were successful breaking away. And then I continued there for 7 years working.
So you work on different picture?
Different picture.
Over there, on the left, this is a very important information because in a few weeks, you could see that here in Enghien. So you will have to come back to see again the wonderful exhibition you already seen.
Okay.
So Demolition Man,
Yes.
The Shadow, for instance, and one I particularly appreciate, Robin Hood, because, of course, maybe you know already, but who is the guy over there?
Yeah, that's me. That's not me right there. No, I wouldn't want to be that guy. It was me calling for prayer up there. And we had built a set on stage. This is 100% matte painting, which is difficult to do. But what makes it easier and more credible is that it's, first of all, it's darker. And it allows you to be able to get away with a lot. From a dim twilight kind of feel. Plus, you're looking at the light. Eye is always attracted to the light. So the audience will be looking at the sun probably first, maybe, and then the silhouette second. And by that time, you've processed those two things. Maybe the shot is off.
It's over because it's very short.
Yeah, it's a short shot.
You work for weeks, only for 5 seconds.
Yeah, pretty short. And I was always happy with the way the shot looked in the film. This is a little bright but this is not the shot in the film. But I always was happy with that shot. I thought, that's kind of nice. And it kind of has this old, credible feeling of an ancient city. I thought it worked pretty well. Yeah.
So why were you on the screen? Why
Pardon?
you?
Oh, I don't know. We needed somebody to be up there, to move, to create the moment. So I painted a little backdrop that was behind me with the railing was built. And I don't know, we had an expert that came in, a religious expert, to teach me how to do this properly. And we respected that best I could and wore the clothes. And I don't know why it happened. It just did. Didn't want to pay anybody else to do it, It's our company. It's a cheap operation,
Okay, so after 7 years, you had to stop, you had a break for your family.
Yeah.
And 9 years later, you came back to industry, but while you were away, digital matte painting arrived, and suddenly it replaced traditional matte painting. So you had to learn again your job. How did you leave that kind of thing?
Yeah, I took some time off to be with, I had 2 children, so I took some time off. And then I saw Lord of the Rings, and I thought, wow, I felt kind of sentimental about getting back in the industry because Lord of the Rings was so impressive to me, especially the first movie. I was a big fan. And so I kids grew up, and I entered the industry again and worked at a company called The Orphanage. And yes, these are the films I worked on. And I didn't know Photoshop as well as I should have. But they hired me because of my past. I had a reputation. So I sat there, I remember, amongst colleagues that knew what they were doing, feeling very isolated and very, kind of almost sad for my employers because I was really struggling to figure it out, to how to do this. And I didn't want to bother the people over here or the people over there about it because, it's like my responsibility. So I finally got through that, and I worked on Hellboy and did some concept work that I look back on, and I think it's not bad for my first digital matte painting. I don't know if you have that one or not.
I don't.
No, you don't have that. But I look back on it, and it's like, that's pretty good. So, yeah, that's what happened there. Oh, yes. And we were working on Sin City, so I was asked to do some concept work for it, and I used some old-fashioned methods, from Hoth. And by this time, everybody was converted to digital, but I still felt like, why don't it would be easy to get some baking soda and make snow on a tabletop and just shoot it. And so I did that. I still incorporated a little bit of miniature work into the actual concepts and the shots. Yeah.
And then suddenly you went to New Zealand.
Yeah, because there was a gentleman there. It wasn't just spontaneous. There was somebody that worked on Lord of the Rings working at this company, The Orphanage. And I said how much I respected that movie. And he said, well, why don't you apply down there. And I thought, well, okay, I didn't know about application. I didn't know about the company that much. And he explained everything, and I applied, and they said, yeah, why don't you come down for King Kong?
So this is your concept for King Kong. It's beautiful.
Yeah, this is for Skull Island. I was there about 6 weeks as I was hired technically as the supervisor for matte painting. And then I had a meeting with Peter Jackson, and he asked me to art direct Skull Island. And so I foolishly said yes. Because I'll tell you a brief story. I'll keep it general. But I was new to the company. The company had a foundation in New Zealand, so there was a lot of New Zealand people. But there were a lot of foreign people, too, at that company. And I didn't want to, I didn't know the culture. I didn't know the corporate culture. And I said yes to something that was so big for me to take on by myself that I soon found out that, oh my word, what have I said? I said yes to this. And it was really hard politically to get established there. Because one day, I'm a stranger, and I'm going to these department heads saying, Peter has given me the task to art direct. And they didn't know who I was. So it was really tough to get established and have credibility with them. But I did over time, and I did what I could. And at the end of the process, I did get told by Peter that it looked better than it otherwise would have been. So for Peter, that's a compliment.
That's great.
Yeah, but that was months and months of a lot of concepts. I probably did thousands of concept work, similar to this.
And you, as a director, you had to create whole universe. I mean, like this wonderful, extraordinary smoke dragon. So maybe,
yeah.
How did you create? Because that's not landscape.
No, it isn't. And I'm not that much of a creature designer, but, I did what I could. So, yeah, we end up with this creature here. Yes. Smog. Yes.
You had to create different versions, a lot of iteration. How many, for instance?
Well, I was notoriously bad about this whole idea, and if anybody is doing concept work out there, they probably shouldn't follow what my practice was, which was I would do like one version that was pretty good that I liked, and then I would do literally like 12, 15, 20 variations, or what they used to call iterations. And I would just vary some slight thing or lighting a little bit. And I think it got boring for the director. It's kind of like too much, too many choices, too little change between them. So I learned from that, and I stopped doing that. But,
so just one?
Yeah, I made a few mistakes, and then I stopped.
This is very interesting because it's a CG project, so it's not quite the same as like visual effect. You can create everything. So this is a big, friendly giant.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to show a little excerpt, and then we're going to see your wonderful landscape.
I love this movie. The experience of working on it, I loved this movie. I worked with Rick Carter. It was a very unusual circumstances because I had finished a couple of projects, I think, like Lovely Bones I art directed, and then this one. And I'd always work within Weta, for Weta, in the hierarchy of the organization of Weta. And then suddenly Rick Carter, who is a production designer for Steven Spielberg, said, well, why don't I directly work with you, Michael? And I said, okay, we could try that. So he reviewed my work instead of Weta. And I found that to be very fascinating because the first thing that he said to me is, I want a certain feeling about this. And Weta is a very technical company. It's highly technical. It's brilliant in its technology. But I was always trying to, again, that balance between the arts and the science, I wanted to bring more art into it. And Rick Carter was the artist guy, production designer. And he understood my language, and I understood his. So it was a really fun experience for me to work with him. And I did a lot of concept work on the show.
Yeah, I've got plenty of that. Just wonderful. Where did you find your inspiration for those kind of beautiful landscape?
Well, first of all, probably a storyboard, but there is a kind of a mood that you can read the script and get a sense of what they're looking for. It's romance, beautiful lighting. I've always been attracted to, let's have beautiful lighting. Let's not, let's try to keep pushing the lighting to make it as gorgeous to the eye as possible. So I did that the best I could. Yeah.
And did you, of course, did some researches, some real references as well? Real landscape and...
Again, reference is important, and I think they had an island chain that they provided me with that had a lot of different aspects that they liked, these sharp angles, and the isolation, the feeling of the isolation of it was really important. But the details, rock textures and things like that, everything, yeah.
And I'm going to show you a teaser from another wonderful work. And you have to search for the work of Michael.
Milo, regarde ça. La licorne. C'est une pièce tout à fait unique. Le plus beau navire qui ait jamais vogué sur les 7 mers.
Combien votre bateau?
Il n'est pas à vendre?
Vous allez au-devant de grands dangers.
Quelque chose est arrivé sur ce bateau. Quel secret renfermes-tu? Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça? La maquette cache un indice qui conduit à l'un des plus grands trésors de l'histoire. Bravo, Minou! Vous prenez la responsabilité de cette preuve?
Pas d'inquiétude, Tintin. Cette preuve est en sécurité avec nous. Dupont, où es-tu? Eh ben, je suis déjà au bas de l'escalier. Essaie de suivre.
Il ne sait pas ce qu'il attend.
Vous connaissez la valeur de ce manuscrit. Je le trouverai, avec ou sans votre aide.
Merci. À propos, je m'appelle Tintin.
Haddock. Archibald Haddock. Retrouvez-les, tous les deux. Les mains en l'air. Vous savez ce que vous faites, hein?
Vous inquiétez pas, j'ai interviewé un pilote une fois.
Je le jure, j'avais trouvé ce trésor avant lui.
Qu'avez-vous fait?
J'ai allumé un petit feu.
Dans un bateau? Eh bien, nous voilà dans de beaux draps.
Personne n'aura mon navire.
Ça peut sembler un peu fou, mais j'ai un plan.
Génial.
On n'y est pas encore.
Non, la terre.
Vous avez touché quelque chose?
Oh là là. Accrochez-vous, Tintin.
On ne peut plus faire machine arrière.
So, we are going to go to your wonderful concept art.
Okay. Oh, thank you. The captain that you just saw in this was basically based on Peter Jackson's face. So I don't know if you could know exactly what he looks like, but it's not exactly him, but it was based on him. So when I saw it, I thought of, oh, that's him. I couldn't help but see that. Yeah, this is some of the concept work, the fight on the ships. I tried to do my concept work in a way that's not too loose and stylized, because here's what I thought, and maybe this is not necessary, but I thought I want to give as much information as possible to all the departments that would have had to make this. So detail-wise, you don't want to be too ambiguous, and it could be very artistic, and here's this grand brushstroke you've done, but it doesn't define the foam maybe in the water well enough. So I was trying to do very precise concept work, not stylized. Like, this is what the frame should look like. And I think it was the most efficient way to get the job done, to just show everybody textures and model builders or makers, not makers, I guess the modeling department, right? Everything they needed to know. And that was my goal. Yeah.
And you had to create a lot of concept in this picture, because you have this kind of landscape, interior of the room, inside.
Yeah.
This one is so beautiful too.
Right. All very precise matte. I almost said matte painting, but very precise concept work, to define the look of the film. And I was art director for visual effects for all of it, so yeah, I was involved in that.
And the last project I'd like to talk to you is a very impressive one because it's a wonderful universe. We are going to see the teaser, and again you have to guess what are the Michael Pangrazio shots.
Okay.
Hey, Mom! Look at me! Smile! My name is Salmon, like the fish.
Okay, shipmate, take it away.
First name, Susie. Bye, Dad.
Bye, Susie. You are beautiful, Susie Salmon.
I was 14 years old when I was murdered
You're the salmon girl, right?
on December 6th, 1973.
We didn't find her, Mrs. Salmon. I'm very sorry.
Dad, she's dead, isn't she? You miss her, don't you?
She's gone.
What if she isn't? What if she's still here?
Grandma, Susie's in the in-between. I wasn't gone. I was alive in my own perfect world. But in my heart, I knew it wasn't perfect. My murderer still haunted me.
Gentlemen, Len. Susie would never go off with a stranger. It had to be someone she knew. I've got a name for you. This is police work. This is what we do.
My father had the pieces, but he couldn't make them fit.
You have a tomb in the middle of your house.
I waited for justice, but justice did not come.
You're a salmon girl, right? There's definitely something wrong with this guy.
Why won't you listen to him?
Because you need evidence. You need proof.
Can't you just leave it alone? Dad!
Come on, face me!
Don't be afraid.
I'll try to be brief about this, but it was a very interesting film to work on because Peter attempted to show heaven, or this world in the book that was explained. And that is a tough one because people have their ideas of heaven. Really difficult project. And there were times when I think he was struggling with, like, how do we make this work? You know, how do we put this on the screen? Because it almost wants to be, you know, Hitchcock, I guess this is an adult audience, right? So I can say this. Hitchcock talked about sexuality and film, and he said, always imply, don't show. And this was the problem with this. We had to show instead of imply so much. So that's kind of a difficulty to overcome. But these were some of the, you know, I wanted it to be a natural world too. I wanted it to be Earth-like, but then with a twist. So
it's beautiful because it's surreal, like surrealism environment.
Yeah.
With those different concepts over there. This beautiful sky.
Yeah, there were these themes in the book and themes in this young girl's life that I wanted to repeat through the frames. You know, the lighthouse was symbolic of her death, and in the book, and you know, her murderer, and there's all these symbolism basically going on. Like this was her, I think her father that was, sorry if I'm wrong about this, it's a long time ago, but I think this was her father, and she was in this dimension, being able to see him through the water like that in the hospital bed. Yeah, this one I like. This one was the tree of, like the tree of life, I guess is a symbol that she was always trying to reach.
And this one, everything is beautiful.
Yeah, and this was kind of a fun sequence of her and her friend. You know, she had a friend at least in this world. This is kind of a dark one. This is more of the murderer's kind of trap for her. And you know, this idea of infinity and danger and just strange surrealness, like you'd fall forever, and you know, I don't know. I don't want to say too much more about that one, but.
And here's a very different project.
Mm-hmm.
So you have. Could you recognize those kind of projects? Not very famous one.
Maybe those films didn't make it to France.
No, I don't think we saw that.
Okay.
So which one do you prefer? Which one would you like to comment about?
Well, that's some Avatar one, just costume design kind of thing. And those are the things necessary for the digital world for them to see, again, you know, to have things defined so they can save money. We're not doing experiments with every department. The department is given the charge or the example of, like, make this, because the directors approved it. So it's much more efficient, like, pipeline, you know, to get something done. Avatar is the one on the upper right. And then, oh, yes, the Planet of the Apes down there. And let's see, the last film I worked on, that one. And I think it was Superman there with that creature.
Definitely. Good.
Yeah.
And Valerian too.
I'm not, full dementia has not set in. I do remember some of them.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And maybe we can have some questions because we wanted to have about 10 to 50 minutes of questions. So would like to talk with Michael.
Okay, hello. So what is the etymology of matte painting? What does matte means in matte painting?
So you're talking about the etymology of the word matte in particular, because painting is self-explanatory.
Yes.
I think it is derived from first a French word that was spelled M-A-T, and suddenly the British got a hold of the phrase, which meant matte surface, or a blocked out, shadowed area. And then the British got a hold of it and destroyed the word, and added a T-E to the end of it. So it developed into matte, M-A-T-T-E painting, which I still think is very strange because I don't think that word exists anywhere else but the original French version of the. So you should have national pride about that. But they've taken the word and kind of made it obscure and difficult to understand. But does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So, hello. So first of all, thank you for your explanation, the time you took to explain everything. And secondly, I wanted to know how was it to find a reference? Because nowadays it's simple, we just have to open Pinterest and find some reference to for a mood board. But at that time, I guess it was more difficult to find pictures, to then draw some Nepal mountains. So I was curious to know how was it? Thank you.
I was always in search for reference because, again, my limitation of being able to do something out of my head. And maybe that would have been appropriate, but not for film so much, especially if it had to look realistic. So we struggled. We had a huge film library at ILM, and we tried to develop one. They didn't really have one at the beginning, but I was promoting the idea, and we had thousands and thousands of photographs. And every time anybody went out on location, I requested that would they please take photos. These were the days of the film camera, you know, the still film camera. And we developed a huge library and tried to categorize it. That's always the problem. Like, okay, the sky's beautiful, but it's a mountain. Do you call it a sky? Do you call it a mountain reference? How do you do it? So that was always a problem. But we had so many aids in that regard that it was a whole task just to gather a reference library. A library is very important for research. And, you know, anybody who makes films, having a library is essential. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Michael, wait, do I say? Well, should I say?
Oh, okay. Hi.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Hi,
Mr. Michael. Thank you for the conference. It has to do a little bit with the question my friend asked. So I'm also an artist, right? And most of the times when I'm trying to create stuff, I usually just end up copying your stuff. So, like, the thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you, like, how do you get that originality? Like, I know you have your library and stuff, but how do you know when something is, like, unique, when you got it, you know? I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but I hope I am. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fine to copy people's work because that's how the older artists, all throughout the eras of art, you know, they had apprenticeships, but they also had copyists. And you know, you even can go to a museum today, and sometimes if they allow it, you can see a student painting from the life, if you want to call it that, live at the museum of another painting, and you learn so much from others. And I don't think anybody has created this. It's all evolved. And anything that's evolved, you can take steps backward and deconstruct it and kind of see points where it's worth focusing, because there's a lot of rich information at that point. So if you feel like that's your point, me and you know some of the things I've done, then I'm flattered. Thank you for that. But I think it's finding those points and copying, and then out of that will come your own original sort of style, which you have to be careful of, that it doesn't, unless it's a stylistic request, you know, of a client, that you try to make it as real as possible. Does that make sense? Okay, great.
Hi, I have two questions actually. The first one is, where did you learn to paint? And the second is, what advice would you give to a young person who is looking to enter this industry now?
Okay, those are really good questions and very profound, actually, or pertinent, very important. The first one isn't so important, but I taught myself, but I had Ralph McQuarrie, and then I have Alan Maley help me. And I just observed, you know, I just kind of had my own way to approach things. It does surprise me when I look back on the little films that were shown of me painting these big Sykes. I didn't know how to do that. I just kind of did it, you know, and but I did it with reference. They shot for the Haas sequence. They went to Iceland. I think it was Iceland, maybe, or Norway or someplace. I'm sorry, it's a long time ago, but they shot reference because they had live action footage. So I took those and kind of synthesized. I take a little here, a little there. I like that sky. I like that ridge, and I'll make my own version of it. You know, so I'm not strictly copying things. I'm trying to enhance and embellish and picking the best things from different menus. It'd be like going to a restaurant and you're picking, you know, you just want the appetizer here and you want, you know, part of a dish here, and you're making your own out of that. So that's where a little bit of judgment and creativity comes. Now, for the question about what advice would I give young people, it's harder and harder, I think, and I don't want to be negative or depressing. But I think AI is on the horizon. It's probably already kind of moving into the concept area and other areas. Actually, in my opinion, every area of human life. So it's to be, I think it's a cautionary time to be very skeptical about how they're going to sell it as convenience or whatever. But that's another story. I think I went to something called Lightbox in Pasadena, which was a convention. And it was about digital art, and I saw 11,000 student-type people, young people, wanting to be discovered in a way, or wanting to go up to the tables, the hiring tables, and put their application in. And unfortunately, I talked to one of the recruiters, and from, okay, I won't say, but one of the recruiters, and she says, you know, we just aren't looking for people right now. And I just thought, what a sad thing. All these people are here, these young people, and they've got a lot of dreams and a lot of desire to contribute, you know, and be creative. And so I think it's getting harder and harder. I don't want to leave it there, really, but that's what I think. it's kind of sad. But I think there's less positions, and I think there will be more technology that's going to replace people, really. Okay.
Hello, just here on the right.
Oh, okay.
Hello. My question is about AI. So, do you think that AI can be an interesting tool if used properly?
Yeah, I think it can be. Dylan Cole was in the first film that you saw of the background of my past and things. Dylan Cole's the production designer on Avatar, the 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I talked to him. I know him personally, and I talked to him about this issue, and he said, yeah, I use it. James Cameron uses it, So it's in there. It's a tool. It's pretty irresistible to not use it because it does give you results. And I think there is something that is important, which is I was always open to happy accidents because I knew my limitations. And when two things came together that I didn't plan or expect, it was a surprise. And you want to be opportunistic about what you see visually. And sometimes you may not plan it, and you see it all of a sudden. It's like, well, that's different. I never thought of that, but it's really good. And I think that's AI's role right now, is to give you options, to give you a different look. Although what I've seen, as complex as it is, it still has a synthetic look to me. It's still not quite 100% realistic, but it's getting closer and closer, and it's going to get there. So I think it could be used, but I think it's sort of going to go out of control. That's my opinion. It's going to dominate everything eventually because it's studying us as the human race collectively, and we're programming it. We're feeding it our stories personally and our history as human beings, our civilization history, art history, everything. We're feeding it, and it's taking in all this information. All our dysfunction is going to be there. All the beauty that the human race is going to be there. All of this, but it's going to be all in one brain. And we can't compete with that. There's no way that you can stand up against that when it becomes conscious, let's say, or self-aware at some point. So that's the danger I see. It becomes godlike. So I want to stop there, but anyway, because it gets worse. So I'm stopping. Sorry.
Hi. Yeah. So hi.
Hi.
So I had first of all, thanks for your presentation. I have a question about what's for you makes a good artistic directions. What are the pillars that you try to build for when you try to create an artistic direction?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I look at historical artwork. I look at the principles of composition, and there are these kind of principles, the golden, sort of one-third, one-third, one-third composition, across to where you don't put anything right in the middle, unless you want symmetry, which I must at this point, because I'm in France, compliment the French aesthetic. I don't know if you invented it, but you use symmetry a lot in your formal gardens and in your chateaus, and symmetry is just so grand and so beautiful and so harmonious. So that's a principle, of decorative arts and art history. So I take in all those principles that I can learn about. Good composition, good lighting is important, presentation, showmanship. That's a part of okay, you've got these pillars, but how do you present it? It sometimes could be presented in a very showmanship-like way. I used to try to do that, and I did sometimes. It was a presentation that was more impressive because of the way it was presented. That was thought about too. So I think the principles of art, again, composition, form, line, directing the eye. What are you trying to say? What are you conveying to the audience? What emotion would you like to evoke? And color can come into that. Composition can come into that. And I think creating an emotion was what Rick Carter kind of emphasized and taught me, instead of the technical. You know, he didn't care if it looked real. He didn't care about that part. He said, I want the audience to feel this when they see this. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good. Yeah, that's what I want too. So it's learning those principles, you know. I don't know, did I really explain that? Okay?
I mean, I understood, but...
Okay.
That's my side.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Hello.
Hello.
So I have a question. In video game, I can find some landscape like your painting. Sorry. So my question was if you know if company continue to paint their landscape in video games or just modeling them. I don't know if
Oh, do you mean did I continue to do work in video? Is that what you're asking?
No, just if video game are made by painting or just technology with 3 dimension.
You mean today, how is a video game made?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if there's that much matte painting in video. Maybe, I mean, there was a problem when I was at Weta doing film work where they still kept matte painting. I thought it would disappear, kind of matte painting. But then they had these backgrounds, which they called deep backgrounds. You know, they'd have a foreground, it was all rendered, and it was all these polygons, but they only could have so many billions of polygons, and it just would take too long to render, too expensive. So they had us do matte paintings in the deep background, you know, like the furthest away hills and the sky maybe even, or the horizon. And that saved money and saved the processing, you know. Now for video games, I've never worked on a video game. So I don't really know what the current technology is, but I think it's probably, I mean, many people here would probably be able to answer your question a lot better than me. But, so I'm kind of sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. I'm sure there's somebody that can help you with that.
My question is, you mentioned that especially in the in the beginning of your career, you were more artistic rather than technical. Did you ever find it kind of difficult to catch up on the technical side, especially since you've been working on newer films as well, and you kind of always adapted to the newer techniques that have been used? But wasn't it kind of hard to not only want to work on the artistic side and just basically give up on the...
Yeah, I love your question. I love it because it seems like you've analyzed my life and you've characterized it in one question that is so true. That's who I am, somebody who has always struggled with technology. And I think that there must be a tolerance for the person like me, at least, in a system where it's purely technical. Although, let's put it this way, is that, you know, the gentleman talked about the pillars, you know, these substantial, articulatable principles of art, what makes good art. And I think the computer can be programmed to consider those. So I think that, you know, at Weta, I always suspected that they would have a button someday that they could push to make the shot look good, rather than having to even talk about it. It was like, make the shot look good button. And it was programmed to make it look good. Because it's just like, I think beauty can be analyzed and it can be replicated, definitely. And there are things about beauty or the truth of something, like lighting, the physics of lighting, the bounce light, and all these things that are, you know, they're true in nature. There's natural principles involved. And you can replicate those, and they have done that. I'm not saying that they haven't. They've done amazing work, you know, and it's getting better and better. So I was always at a phase. I was always feeling inadequate in terms, kind of inadequate and kind of proud of myself that I wasn't pulled into the new software that everybody was struggling with. I just kept kind of flowing, like, how can I still contribute without having to learn that? Because I'm not that good at it. I'm old, you know? And an older generation person like me is not as proficient at learning computer software as young people are, because they grow up with it. So I had to settle in that, and I got away with it all the way to the time I've kind of stopped. But I got away with it. I still was hired. So that's kind of a miracle, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So maybe one last question, because we are running out of time.
Hello. Thank you very much for everything that you already explained. I just had one last question. In the beginning of your presentation, if I may say, you talked about how filmmaking is a mix between technicality and artistic.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask, is it an effort for you to remind yourself of that artistic side when, especially, it's so easy to get lost in the technicality, especially in the VFX? And how do you manage to build a thick skin and take criticism and yet still be sensitive and alert and create? And yeah, how do you deal with this dichotomy?
Yeah, those are two really good questions. I think to survive in the industry as long as I have, because it's been like 43 years or more, I had to make myself relevant to the process without joining the technical people. So that navigation to still contribute, it's almost like if you work for a company that sees it already, you can contribute, and they'll accept you as kind of an odd, interesting, another point of view. And this is what I did as an art director, is I would sit I just look at the image. I didn't have to know how it was made. I could just say, well, that doesn't work there. Could you move that over? Just knowing that it's not good composition. So you can reduce my job and contribution to some of the simple things. Now, what happens with the human mind to me is that people get so caught up in details, especially technical people, you know, like they write code and things like that, that they just don't see the big picture. They just don't get objective. Whereas my job was I could be objective. I just saw it for the first time, and I could say, move that over, or lighten that up, or let's add this to it. And that's where I survived, being artistic and continuing to not be technical. Although I knew a little bit about it, I had a technical, like a person that worked with me to build models and things like that. So I used it, and I used it in my concept work sometimes. We do renders and things like that, you know, for concept work. Okay, the second part of your question, so sorry. Tell me again.
I asked how
do you be sensitive?
Yes, build a thick skin and yet still be sensitive.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I don't want to say that I got hurt emotionally by the process. I want to admit that I was strong all the way through, but sometimes I would be a little hurt, okay? Because the politics were so technically driven, you know? Although I was always saved by some director who saw what I was talking about, because they're also not that knowledgeable about everything, usually. They're just like me. I'm just sitting there receiving these images and these moments, and they're saying whether they like it or not, just like I am. They don't have to know how they did it. Some do. Most of them really don't know how to do it themselves. So I'm kind of in their league in a way. So that's a reason why I could kind of survive and still feel, you know, but I understand your question about, I love beauty, and so that love of beauty kind of sustained me all the way through. Like, let's improve it. Let's make it beautiful. Let's light it better or whatever. And that's a passion that I have that comes from inside. And that sustained me through, you know, the criticisms or the politics, deadly, awful politics sometimes.
Thank you very much.
Of course.